Coming on the show right now is Will Hayes, who is the CEO of Lucidworks. Lucidworks does, I guess, what's called intelligent search. It makes sure that you are, as the user comes to your website, they have a good experience, they're connected. Think of it like Amazon, but only smarter. So other businesses that are looking to make sure that they improve the customer experience, that's what he's leading in. You're gonna hear about his experience. You're gonna hear how he got there. He never actually finished college, but he's one of the few Black CEOs that are leading the way in tech. And he is disrupting the narratives and constructs out there. He is working hard. I know you're going to enjoy his story. I hope you learn more about his company, Lucidworks. But without any further ado, if you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now. Will Hayes, CEO of Lucidworks. I appreciate having you on the show. How you doing today?
Doing all right. Really, really great to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. You know, we had this beautiful in-person interview that we had, and, you know, we don't have that footage, so we're going to have to recreate the best that we can. So I appreciate you allowing us to do this on Disruption Now, and really appreciate your story and what you're doing. And I think you're offer a lot to our listeners.
Absolutely. No, really excited to be here. I think these times have taught us that we have to adapt to any circumstance. So here we are, getting another take going.
So part of what we focus on is disrupting common narratives and constructs, and your story has done that. And I want to take you back to something I read that talked about some of your interactions you have being in the tech world. We know, unfortunately, a lot of people don't see the connection with people of color in the tech world, particularly Black people. It would be really specific.
Absolutely.
In the tech world. So you've had interactions where people either knowingly or not knowingly were racist or ignorant or whatever adjective you want to use there. And you've had people mistake you for the assistant, everything else but the CEO, and their face stops back. And when they say they're CEO, there's a paused look on their face. Talk to people about how to respond to moments like that, because if you're a Black entrepreneur, those moments are going to happen to you. People are going to make assumptions wrongly, and how can you pivot from those moments, and how do you advise people as you know that they're going to go through moments like that, knowing that you at your level of success still go through it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I want to I'll be clear that there's no, I think, answer, right, in terms of just, here's how you deal with it, or here's what you have to do, here's the playbook. I think what's unfortunate, and the way I would classify my experience is it comes around more so as what we would call bias, even unconscious bias in some ways, and in a lot of ways that can be even more difficult. I think we all more or less know how to deal with just sort of blatant racist people, right? People that are just out there in your face. And frankly, I think a lot of us just don't associate in those environments. It's harder when the bias comes in unconsciously, when it comes from people who don't, consider themselves to have any bias bone in their body. And so, and put this into the context of raising money in particular, but really with a lot of folks, Black folks in particular in leadership, there's not this pre-wired assumption that you're the leader, that you're the boss, right? And that shows up in just very subtle but disruptive ways, such as, kind of coming in and greeting a white colleague as if they are your manager, they're your boss, they're the CEO, right? Making assumptions about your role and sort of who you are. And so that's frustrating in every context. And I think, it's funny, I talked to some Black CEOs, we talk about like taking the team out to dinner and just, you're doing all the ordering, you're making sure everybody's taken care of it. At the end of the day, like no one's bringing you the check, right? They're bringing it to somebody else. And so these are all little things, but they tend to add up. In the context of fundraising in particular, what was very just unsettling was those little mistakes, the, greeting my colleague as the CEO, not necessarily knowing who I am, lead to a discomfort. And that discomfort is permeating throughout the room, throughout the entire meeting. Now, a lot of venture capital investing in particular, because remember, this isn't institutional investing where I can go research on Wall Street and understand. It comes down to like a little bit of a gut feel. I believe in this team. I believe in this market. And when you get off, out the gate with this severe discomfort and guilt, it can just derail everything. And so when it comes to coping, to your point, and I'm not going to say this as if I'm proud of it, but in the moment when you're building a company, when you're raising money, you were laser focused. There is nothing that is going to get in my way, including adversity, including bias, including racism. So for me, and I don't know if this was a coping mechanism or just a survival mechanism, my only goal in those moments was to diffuse it. To just look, it didn't happen. Let's just stay focused. Because the moment they stay in that moment, they start dwelling, they start getting uncomfortable, they start getting distracted. They're not hearing what I'm here to present, what I'm here to do. And so that's a severe disadvantage. And that, if anything, and why I tell this story is I want people to be aware that that one little mix-up of you're just not waiting to figure out who the CEO is completely derails the entire process. We can change that. It's simple. We can talk about institutional racism. These are much bigger problems. This is a simple problem that people can fix and level the playing field.
Yeah, and so it's sort of incumbent on you to figure out a way to get people comfortable and move them past that moment. And so, like, you found yourself figuring out how to make a joke out of it, not take it personally, because it actually is not personal. I tell people this all the time. Even when someone is racist, biased, whatever, it has to do with their own experience. It never has anything to do with you.
They don't know you.
Yeah, they don't know you. It's something, it's like they don't know you. And the fact that they have these beliefs, like you said, most people are not bad. But the fact is that I do believe those microaggressions, the indifference maybe to what happens to Black folks and communities of colors, is what allows and empowers kind of situations that are going on right now. I mean, everybody can see, George Floyd, how he was killed and what happened there. And I think most people who have some common decency, there are still some people that won't see it. For them, I won't say there's no hope, but they're not the audience we're trying to reach. We're trying to reach the people which is the vast majority of people that can see this is wrong. Do you think there's any opportunity in this moment for Black founders, for Black CEOs? I mean, I hear companies throwing out, we're going to do 100 million here, 100 million there. I can't tell if that's all just to look good in the moment or if there's actually real opportunity for Black founders, Black investors, Black small startup companies. What do you think is the opportunity in this moment, if any?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because, to your point, I mean, there's definitely a what I call a cultural shift that's occurring. I think that the question that a lot of us have is, okay, this feels a little different than it has in the past, so I can appreciate that. But I'm very skeptical of sort of kind of consistent and more long-term change as it relates to kind of tech and a lot of what we're seeing. I have very mixed feelings about it. And I'll tell you, I mean, obviously representation is important to me. We're doing a terrible job here in the Silicon Valley in terms of, particularly Black representation, Black women even more so. But the reality is that this is not a problem that needs to be solved for any social reason. There is a severe economic disadvantage from not finding these founders. There is a severe strategic disadvantage for not building these teams with more Black representation. There's no question. And so you can tell me all day long that, you want to do better and this is for social good and yada, yada, yada. I'm looking at this as just being a missed opportunity, a missed economic opportunity. So whether you're a limited partner in a venture capital firm, a private equity firm, a organization that's doing strategic investing or a corporation, if you were not looking to this portion of the population, you were missing something. So I want to say that first and foremost. There is a lot of effort going on, and I don't begrudge it, and I appreciate it, but I often get rubbed the wrong way when it feels like this is some type of social responsibility initiative.
Yeah.
Forget about that. This is, again, we are missing a significant opportunity from a return on investment to invest in a population, which adversity creates grit. It creates entrepreneurs. It creates leaders. So statistically, again, your hit rate will be so much higher if you start working with this population that's faced more adversity, the Black population in particular. So venture capital needs to understand that. Now, in terms of the opportunity, look, we should always look for opportunity, take advantage of opportunity. This moment is definitely creating a lot of attention. I would say if you're a Black founder, getting meetings at this point will probably feel easier to you. I don't think people write checks because they feel bad. I've seen this happen. I've seen, funds get announced that are supposed to do X, Y, and Z, yet you rarely see them stay true to that mission. So, at the end of the day, the checks are going to come because we can build conviction. What we need these folks to do is to actually engage with an open mind, to to miss some of the mistakes that, I've experienced and others have been experiencing, so we can get to work here. And that's the most important thing for the community, which is, look, there is opportunity. It's going to take grit. It's going to take determination, and you're going to face adversity. But guess what? Good news. We face adversity.
We've faced worse.
I have a hard time when people hear my story and, oh my gosh, I can't believe you went through that. I'm like, it's funny because that's probably one of the more tame things. I mean, I'm talking about like raising money from venture capital and having some, issues with bias. I mean, let's talk about people's, situations and facing with law enforcement and housing and healthcare.
Yeah.
I mean, forget about it, right? This is a small problem, but it's also one that I think is so easily fixable. That is why I'm investing my energy in really talking about it.
And I want to talk to you. We'll talk a little more offline in this, but I do want to talk about something that we want to launch at the Disruption Now Summit, which is thank you for coming. You're going to be there. And we want to figure out a way to not only get more of the accredited investors, the venture capital money, which there's a lot of efforts being out there, 645 Ventures, Lightship Capital, some of my friends there. But really figuring out, I think, a way we can build a movement to build a large crowdfunding equity where you don't have to just be accredited investors.
There you go.
And have a central focus on that. That's something that I do want to talk to you about, helping us and advising on that, because that's a platform that we are going to build. Because I think that is the next step. We do something like that. And I actually look at it like this. I raised $2.5 million for my campaign. And obviously I didn't win that campaign. But people didn't say, okay, well, give me all my money back. It's like at the end of the day, that's an investment in a way. And these are investments, and all of them won't work out. But more of them will work out when we all start putting more of our money collectively towards it. And if there's a focus, I think this moment, I think you said it well, it's not about social responsibility. At the end of the day, it's really about an opportunity to gain more equity. We want equality is the basics. We want equity, and equity will help everybody, and it will help the investors. And people aren't going to give you something just because they feel guilty. You might get an opportunity to go to the door and present a real concept and idea. And this is your opportunity. Go to the door, be ready to present, because the doors don't always open as that often. When it opens, walk through it.
Well, and frankly, and a lot of this gets talked about. I mean, so much of this industry is around relationship and network, right? So if you don't come from those circles, you're at a disadvantage. So the fact that there's this sort of focus on bringing these entrepreneurs in for conversations, take advantage of it. And, again, there's advantages out there for all types of people. I think this is a moment where there might be an advantage for us to at least get some airtime. Now, again, to the point we both just made, people don't just write checks because they feel bad, right? So you still have to do your work.
You better come prepared.
And frankly, there's no other way that you'd want to get a business off the ground anyway. So it's going to be good for everybody.
Yeah, same rules still apply. So, and you have an untraditional path. Well, actually, it's not that untraditional in terms. There's a lot of founders that didn't complete college.
They typically don't look like me, but yeah,
but typically don't look like you. But you have the story of not going to college, just going right in. Talk about that, and talk about did that give you any unique advantages? Did it cause you any, I guess, issues just because people tried to question your credentials, even though, again, that's like standard operating procedure for everybody else. But for us, it's like, well, where are your credentials? Sometimes that's how I look at people.
No, I mean, it's how we've been conditioned, right? And I think as a community, we understand the merit of education, of just self-enrichment. And so we tend to look to those things as just being the kind of measuring stick. We don't know a lot of self-made entrepreneurs typically in things like high tech. I mean, obviously there's self-made entrepreneurs everywhere, but in terms of just working sort of in the tech industry, for me, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to like my childhood. I grew up in Richmond here in the East Bay of California, and I'm a child of the 80s and 90s and that. And so, when I was about 12 or 13, early 90s, is when, the internet kind of became a thing. Now, this was not the World Wide Web, which is, important for people to understand, where you could just go to a web browser and type in, google.com. No, this was like you were dialing into phone numbers and phone banks and message boards. And
I'm old enough to remember all of that. Yes,
you know what I'm talking about, right? Exactly.
Yes, I do.
And so, what was interesting for me and what was exciting for me was not only getting exposure to that world, and I was very fortunate. We had a computer in the home. That was not very common for anybody, let alone a Black family, right? But the connectivity that provided always just stimulated me. Like, I'm talking to people in Australia, I'm connecting with people all over the world. And then what I found was not only my ability to kind of tap into that world, I could manipulate it. I could build applications. I could build anything. Like information was out there. I could learn. There were books I could get. I could just start building. If I wanted to be like an architect, I couldn't exactly just go build a building in my backyard, but I could write software applications all day long. And so that really clicked for me. And then I was just, I was a born hustler. I was always trying to look for ways to earn money. I was a kid who had like a babysitting business and a dog walking business and, you name it. Right. And so not only did I find this thing that inspired me and I could actually create, and it kind of unlocked that energy, but then I looked around and I said, oh, the world's going to pay for this stuff. And I started building websites and I started doing database administration. I just started doing stuff to frankly just earn money. And I got a lot of attention for that. And even amongst my peers that were making money in a variety of ways, not always on the level, would start to recognize too that like, wow, you're hustling and you're out there doing it and you're doing it with computers. And so that was something that I was always really proud of and my community was always really proud of. Fast forward 1999, I'm getting ready to graduate high school. And I am part of a program that's focused on urban youth and helping them with sort of career development and college development skills, a great organization called Inroads. And that got me to
I was in that too.
Career fair. You were in Inroads. Well, we can talk about that. Yeah, actually, fantastic. And so at the Inroads Career Fair, which is typically geared towards college students, I was a high school student. I met Genentech. And they were a large pharmaceutical company, and they were going through kind of what we call digital transformation. They were trying to move more applications that were old desktop applications to web applications. And it was something I knew how to do. And they were having a hard time not only just finding an intern, but literally hiring anybody to go do this work. And so I came in 18 years old, coming from Richmond, didn't know a whole lot about corporate environments. And here I am now, and I'm getting paid money to work on computers. And they're giving me give me a laptop. They're giving me a phone there, and my mind was blown. I'm just like, this is got to be the greatest thing in the world to have this privilege, And so that kind of is what got me going. Now I'll say one final thing, which is the advantage now that I think I had both with the lack of college, but also just being different, like just being this young kid of color in this environment where there weren't a lot of people of color, let alone people who were 18 years old. I embraced everything. I mean, you could not give me enough work to do. I couldn't sit in on enough meetings. I couldn't do enough informational interviews. I was so just enamored in being in that environment. And that was my real advantage. You'd give me an assignment, a coding assignment or an application that needed to be written in a month, and I would literally do it in the night. I go home that night, I work all night, and I get it done, and I look for something else to go do. And it was joy for me. But what I realized as I got older, and I try to tell younger folks is, look, invest that energy. I was 18, that was great. But you come out of college when you're 22. Invest that energy in your career and in yourself, because frankly, hopefully you're just having fun and working. And so you can just do those two things and it will pay off. And that was for me, the hours that I put in, the sheer just dedication to what I was doing, it advanced me really quickly. And I didn't even think it was work. It was a privilege and it was fun and I was getting paid along the way. So I just, I was blessed for sure.
So speaking about your younger career, what advice would you give to yourself, knowing all the knowledge you have now? It sounds like you would stick to working hard. It sounds like nothing would change there. But is there any other advice you may give yourself, knowing what you know now? And what advice would you ignore?
Yeah, good question. So I think the two things that I feel like I'll be 40 next year. And so the last, my 30s where I've developed a lot. I think two things that I've really come to just learn and appreciate. One of them is you've got to continuously learn. And I don't mean just absorb and be open-minded. I mean, you are out there pursuing knowledge. You're reading books, you're watching lectures, you're looking to people in industry or otherwise that you can really aspire to be and to look up to, and just try to absorb as much as possible. I didn't do enough of that in my 20s. I was very focused on new programming language or whatever I need to do to kind of do my job. There's so much more knowledge out there that now—
You mean be broader in your knowledge.
Be broader. Yeah. I mean, and absorb, again, seek out information, So today, I read a lot now about just organizational leadership. I love reading, case studies and memoirs. I just got through Shoe Dog and, about Phil Knight and the Nike story. There's so much great information. And I just tell myself, I missed out on 10 extra years of just consuming this stuff. So that's definitely key. The other thing that I've gotten, much more focused on as I've gotten older, and I wish I would be doing this, and it's harder when you're younger because we all have a little more ego about us, but be very, very clear with yourself about where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Yes.
Really understand them, and leverage those strengths, try to apply them in places, look for opportunities to apply those strengths. But more importantly, know your limitations, know where your weaknesses, and you can work on those. You can figure out ways to kind of develop, you can engage and get help from other people, but you also know how to avoid them, and
Yes.
so learning how to just say, you know what, I'm not really good at this thing. I'm going to make sure that I spend as little time as possible doing that, because it's not a great application of my skill. And so again, when we're younger, we think we can do anything, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder to come with that humility that says, look, these are some things I need to work on, or frankly, I'm just not good at. But once you have that awareness, it's like a superpower, because now you can leverage your strengths and you can leverage them correctly, and you can wield it like a power, and you can avoid some of your shortcomings. But self-awareness is definitely the key to that.
Yeah, I want to talk a little about your entrepreneurial journey, and um, this is not a linear process. I'm sure you've had, right. I mean, I'm sure there's been bumps along the road. Can you think of a time when something may have seemed like a failure, but then it later set up to be a better opportunity, or that wasn't the right opportunity, and that experience helped develop you into a better entrepreneur or into a better leader?
Definitely. I mean, I think I've been fortunate I've had a very enriching career, and a lot of that has been to do with just I've had some very great support and mentors around me throughout. And then part of it is just, I think, how I just tend to look at the world. I mean, look, like challenges, I mean, these are all opportunities to grow and to learn. And frankly, if you're not being challenged, I always feel that I'm sort of withering away as a person, right?
Yeah.
And this is because I'd say
I'm the same way.
Exactly. And and I'm inherently lazy. And so I know that about myself. So what I also find is, look, if you're not pushing and you're not learning, you're probably just coasting. And so that's, something that you've got to definitely look at. So that helps kind of just deal with the ebbs and flows, particularly in entrepreneurism. When I came to Lucidworks, I mean, I was young, I was 32. I was asked to come in and kind of lead this company through a turnaround. They were doing something before that the investors just wanted to stop, but they wanted to try to pivot it. It's a very difficult thing to do in any circumstance, but let alone you get this 32-year-old, CEO coming in, has very little operating experience, but has a vision for what needs to be done. And, again, I was a little naive in terms of how hard it would be. And so when I came in, I'm like, look, here's the thing that we need to go build. I can see it clearly. I know exactly what we need to go do. And then the reality of trying to move an organization towards that vision, pivot that organization, deal with the baggage and some of the history and some of the drama. And, when I first got in there, I remember I had all this motivation and energy, and it just felt like we were just getting hit. We couldn't raise money, so now we're going to run out of money. Somebody wrote a really negative article about us that was completely uncalled for and frankly not true, but it was just debilitating, and it just was such a gut punch to us. We had some...
And it had a wide reach, I take it.
Personnel, very wide reach, right? Venture beat. We had some personnel kind of leave in a huff and create a bunch of drama and things. So, there were moments where you're just sitting there just like, I feel like I'm in this burning building and I feel hopeless. And, not to mention that I had walked away from a job that, I was like employee number 2 of like 3,000 people, and I was having a great career and I was making money. And so it wasn't like I had nothing to do at the time.
Right.
So, that was a moment there. And there was a few moments there where it's just like, I can't win. I don't know what to do. Now, what we did end up doing, and my wife always pushes me on this, it's like, you hit the bottom, and then it's like, well, where do you go from here? Right? Like, it's not going to, you're kind of beaten down. I'm not trying to be one of these, like, whatever, give a pep talk, but I'm just like, look, there's a point in which you're just like, it can't really get any worse. So what am I going to do? I'm going to stew in this, or I'm just going to start building. And I think that experience, and I've had to go through, like you said, it feels like it ebbs and flows, but just knowing that, like, at any point, there's always a way to move forward, right? Now, look, it doesn't mean it's not going to be painful and emotional and overwhelming, but the more overwhelming it is, just make the steps smaller. All right, I'm here today. Tomorrow, I just got to get over here. You know what I'm saying? And you just
that's a really good point. When it's overwhelming, just break it down to small.
Break it down to something smaller. And it's to me, it's like it's just how you just continuously move forward. And then once you start to get your rhythm, you can pick up your pace a little bit. And then, you find yourself in a moment where you go, wait, now I'm standing in a valley of a whole bunch of new problems, which sucks. But frankly, Remember back when I thought I was like at the end of my rope and I wasn't going to be able to go anymore? I got here. So then that motivation of reminding yourself that like, hey, look, you made it this far. So just keep going one step at a time. You know what I'm saying? So so I think that's really been just kind of the key of navigating it. But look, I mean, I will have highs that are really high and lows that are really low. And there's nothing like just being up on that high and letting yourself get comfortable just for a minute. Like, hey, you know what? It's pretty good up here. And just boom. You know, COVID-19 hits you, and
man.
You know,
and the whole world changes.
Like,
oh my God,
the whole world changes, and you're just like, well, shit. What am I gonna do now? You know,
so let's talk about Lucidworks. What Lucidworks is, and then talk to me about how this moment is or is not affecting the business, and how you're approaching the COVID-19 world for the foreseeable future. Because it looks like we're going to be doing this for a while.
For a little bit, absolutely. So, what we build is it's a search engine, and it's a search engine that companies deploy on their own websites. A lot of large retailers, for instance, companies like REI, companies like AT&T, most of the major home improvement chains, most of the large grocery chains. We control the search experience on their website. Now, search isn't just you type in a keyword and you get back something. It means that we're ranking those results based on your preferences. We're personalizing those results. We allow for things like product recommendations and discovery to occur. So we use artificial intelligence to determine, hey, people who buy these things might also buy these things, or people who tend to like the same things as you often purchase these things over here. We give tools to merchandisers so they can control and promote and do different things around that experience. And so we're controlling those experiences for a number of the top retail brands. We also do it for companies just to help their own internal operations and finding stuff for employees. So large oil and gas companies, large banks like Morgan Stanley. We've been in the business for doing this for about 7 years now. We released the product 5 years ago. We've grown the business quite substantially. And so we're about a $70 million revenue, $70 million a year run rate business. And yeah, we're continuing to kind of just refine those capabilities. I think, my vision for the world is really that, we create engaging, connected experiences that are digital. It's one thing to walk into a store and have, you're at REI, you want to go camping, and whether it's your first time camping or you're going to go camp on top of Kilimanjaro, there's somebody at REI who can tell you everything you need to know about the boots, about the material, about the various equipment that you need. That's the experience. That's why you go to REI rather than just go to Amazon and buy something cheap. Well, now in this new world, obviously, those brands need to carry those experiences into those digital channels. And so we really help them craft that. And that's part of our mission. When you think about COVID, it's interesting. On one hand, you'd say, wait, you guys are an e-com provider. This must be great for you. And the reality is, in some cases, it is, right? Customers are scrambling now to figure out their digital strategies. So much of retail still relied on that brick and mortar experience. Yeah, they all had websites, but were they good? Not necessarily.
No.
So a ton of
use Wix and call it a day.
Thank you. There you go. Right. And then you can't find anything, and it's not personal. And like, you seem like every time I just bought this thing, why don't you know what version I had? There's so many things that create these frustrating experiences. And by the way, why they're frustrating? Because we know what's possible. We've been on Amazon, we've been on Facebook, we've been on Netflix. So why is it when I go to shop on your site, it breaks down? I feel like I'm back in 1999, right? And forget about it. When I come into work and I try to use one of those applications, I feel like I'm in 1989, right? And so that understanding is what's creating a lot more demand for the kind of stuff that we do. So on one hand, again, we're engaging customers, we're supporting them. Some of our retail customers have seen, Black Friday is always the big event in retail, right? Where you're going to get the most traffic, you're going to have the most deals. And they're seeing Black Friday like traffic just sustaining through March, April, into May even. Now, some of that slowed down because we all went home. We bought a new exercise bike. We bought a new mixer. We bought some lawn furniture for the backyard because we're not going on any vacation anytime soon, right? So there was a big spike in spend, and then that's kind of tapered off. Clearly, consumer spend is down. So what that does for our business is it means a number of our customers are cautious. So they're not pushing big initiatives forward. They're not making major investments. They're being very incremental in the things that they're doing. So we've had to adjust our business with an expectation of, look, the customers that we serve are in a good position and they renew well. And, we can just continue to focus on their success and invest in their success. And we're going to let the market kind of determine when it's ready to pick back up again. Yeah. But most importantly, we are going to position our business so we can withstand any market events that occur. And so that means that we look at expenses, we cut cost, we try to reduce the overall budget, and just ensure that we're preserving as much cash as possible. So if this goes on for 2-3 years, we don't have to worry about running out of money or doing layoffs or anything like that. So we're trying to look down the road and assume the worst, and then hopefully we all just find out that we overreacted and we get back to normal sooner rather than later.
That's the hope. But there probably, even when that happens, there will probably be a delay.
It'll take time.
It'll take time because people are gonna. So part of what I do, I have a company that does kind of aligns with what you do, but doesn't do the AI version, but we do research, data, and marketing. And we've done a lot of research. And as you said, in February, we were looking at this. People were taking this seriously. And then by March, it was done. I mean, they were Democrats, Republicans, anybody across the board. People, no matter what they were telling you, the pollsters, what we saw is people are taking this seriously. And even when things get back to normal, or people say, the governors say it's okay, even when the healthcare experts say it's okay, there's going to be a lag in people's, response to get back to normal.
Exactly.
And the question is, what does normal look like? Do we actually change? Does human behavior change because we've set in so much? Do we do more virtual events now? Do these things change? And how do you position yourself to be ready for that as a business? Speaking about that, when you talk about your business with AI, I heard a lecture from you, and you talked about the need to make AI more connected to the human experience and think and have more empathy and our understanding for the human experience. What do you mean by that?
So a really good way to think about AI being non-experiential is Amazon. Amazon's very effective and it's very efficient.
They are effective.
So, we can spend money. In fact, look, just open up the homepage and you're going to start shopping, right? It's no secret that they've figured this out. But what they really lack from an Amazon perspective is there's no context. There's no human level experience to it. And we see it, right? I mean, how many times if go, shopping for a lawnmower and you keep getting recommended running shoes and other things, right? And I had a brand tell me one time, a clothing brand, they said, the problem with Amazon is Amazon has no taste. And so the difference between what machine learning gets deployed in the sense of an Amazon and kind of what we do is Amazon's all about machine learning decision making. I'm going to sell you this. I'm going to promote you that. There's no one there to really decide, does this make sense? If I'm out there mowing the lawn, why do I need to shop for running shoes right now?
Right.
Human beings have that intuition. So what I talk about is, look, AI should not be a decision engine because frankly, it can't make a good decision. It's a computer. It's not a person. But what AI can do is we can assist the human in making more informed decisions. So for instance, what we do with one of our products, we call it the predictive merchandiser, is we will tell a merchandiser, if you're looking at running shoes, these are the top selling running shoes by brand, by color, whatever, we're monitoring all of that stuff. We use our machine learning to make a recommendation to say, hey, look, if someone's looking for running shoes, we really think that these Nikes are the way to go. But we surface that to a merchandiser who goes, you know what? Yeah, the Nikes are cool, but man, everybody's talking about these new Adidas and we're running a campaign over here. I'm going to actually I'm going to override the AI to tell it what I want it to go do. That's a human being who understands the context. Remember that person at REI who could tell us how to plan for our first camping trip?
Right.
It's the same idea. So in order for AI to be effective, it has got to have more human training, more human kind of in the middle. Now that's being effective. The second part is biases. So think about language. So much of what we do to train AI is we look to the way people are talking. We look to the way they're talking on the internet. We look at the way they're talking on Twitter. And we use those conversations to inform the way that chatbots and artificial intelligence should behave. Have you ever read Twitter? Have you ever read the comment section of a news site? And you're going to tell me this is like, it's like if you had a child, a baby.
It's the bottom of the barrel of the earth sometimes of comments and people.
So AI is like a child, right? It's a brain that's just completely absorbable and permutable. And we're telling this child that we want you to learn to speak English and actually not even speak English. We want you to be like a conversing member of society, but you're going to go learn everything on Twitter.
Right.
And the way people talk on Twitter, the way they communicate, the way they relate sentiment to things like race, to things like sex. And then we wonder why we have problems like the chatbot that Microsoft put out that was like racist.
I mean, because it's learning. Well, it's learning a lot of the biases that we have, and it's just re-implementing them.
Thank you. Now let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you think you and I would be surprised by the outcome of a racist chatbot that was trained on Twitter? Hell no. The people at Microsoft were. Who do you think was in that room making those decisions? Was anybody like you or I sitting in that room?
Probably not. That's my guess.
So again, you could tell me that this is wrong, that it's socially unjust. Forget about all that. You just failed. You just spent millions and millions of dollars on an initiative, and it's a complete failure, and it's a PR disaster. And it's because you didn't have any black people in the room.
Hey, there you go.
There you go, right there. We can talk about economics all day.
Yeah, and so I think the challenge with that is they found so much success. When I say they, the big tech world, I'm going to take Facebook as my main example here. And I've read a lot on Mark Zuckerberg and his feelings and how he's approached this. One of the books, I think it's called, it's about big data. I think Everybody Lies is what it's called. Everybody Lies.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's a great book. And it talks about the 2016 election, how all the polls got things wrong. And I think the challenge is, human beings aren't as self-aware as they should be either. And you mentioned the unconscious bias, that's real. And so people wouldn't say who they were voting for in 2016 because they were kind of ashamed of who they were voting for. But now, so people were, but you can tell by their data where they were leaning towards. And I know Facebook has saw an opportunity. Mark Zuckerberg he talks about this or hints around this. He's the voyeuristic nature of how human beings are, how we like to sometimes go after each other. We have aspirational things too, but I think he's seen, and so far social media has seen, that they can make more money, not based upon what people say they want to see, but what they actually want to see.
Yes.
And so how do you balance that out? Because I see where you're coming from and I love it.
Yeah.
But I also think okay, there's clearly a market for what we don't admit we want to see, but we clearly want to see it.
There's no question. I mean, I think first off, these aren't just one problem, right? So like the Microsoft example, you're putting out a chatbot into the general population that's meant to answer questions and be useful and frankly, be an important business driver, right? And so the fact that they allowed so much bias to occur and weren't thinking about that ahead of time is just a failed business initiative. So
yes.
that hurts you more than it hurt anybody else.
Absolutely.
Facebook is different because Facebook is now it's a utility, right? It's become so pervasive in the way we live that we have to kind of treat it and think about it differently. And to your point, we might decide to do things with our utilities that others may not find to be very tasteful. It's sort of my prerogative to read hate speech. It's my prerogative to converse about violence and, these types of things. And look, I think of all the people and just, where I can empathize, and this might sound funny, is I empathize. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's got the hardest job in the world because on one hand, first off, he's a creator. And I have all the admiration and respect for that because it's just building it's what makes us human. But at the same time, the level of responsibility in terms of the impact of what that platform can have.
Yeah.
So we can talk about where he maybe can do things differently or better. But the thing I have a hard time believing is that somebody else can just drop in and get it right.
No, that's kind of my point. So this thing is how do you
do it?
How do you do this? And I love a term you said, artificial intelligence. You don't like to view it that way. It's really augmented intelligence.
Augmented intelligence, right.
Yeah.
But this is hard. It's one thing to augment intelligence when I'm trying to help somebody sell running shoes, right? Look, it's I'm the company. I can decide how I want to augment that intelligence. If I'm right, I make more money. If I'm wrong, I don't. It's kind of on me. It's now when we're talking about manipulating opinion, when we're talking about spreading false information,
yes.
This is where it becomes such a blurred area. And actually, frankly, I don't have an answer because, look, on the one hand, you could say, well, it's easy. Just have people fact checking. But now we get back into bias. Yeah. I have bias.
People don't believe facts.
People don't believe facts. What's an interpretation of a fact? You and I have a certain interpretation of what's going on in the world as it relates to police violence compared to other people. We both think we understand the facts. Right. So it's a very slippery slope and it's a very dangerous game when we start to kind of use our opinions on what is right and what is wrong.
Agreed.
So that is clearly a problem.
But I guess the challenge goes back to what you said, and I don't have the answer either, but you're one of the smartest people I know on this, so I'm just putting it out there that, artificial intelligence is also, I think, accelerating the issues that we internally
There's no
have.
question.
It's accelerating the pre-existing conditions of the human condition that we don't want to accelerate. Yeah. So that's my, how do we, and this is the question we may not be able to answer now, but I think there needs to be some thought process into this. How do we use artificial intelligence to help us rise to our higher selves and not just our most instinctual selves?
That's a really interesting and important perspective. And I'll tell you, like, machine learning and artificial intelligence at its most base form is just taking like a human operation and accelerating it, right? So let's say I'm going to have you go look at 1 million pictures and tell me which one has a red hammer in it, right? You could do that. It's going to take you a while. Well, if I train a computer to do it, it can just blast through it. So again, it's an extension of kind of us. And so to your point, it can exacerbate problems. So there's 2 things on that. I mean, one thing that I will say is, when it back to sort of the Facebook examples, I get that how you police these types of situations is hard. Whose content do you allow? Whose do you not? But there is one thing that Facebook can make a decision on, and they have all the rights in the world and no one can question them. Where do they go to monetize? Are they taking, to your point, that thread, and are they the ones pulling on it because they see an opportunity? Yeah. They can use their own discipline to determine that, you know what, we're going to stop this particular practice, even though it's good for business, it's good for eyeballs, it's good for traffic, because it perpetuates a negative behavior without having to judge whether the individual post or piece of content. They know where things are being put in by state actors externally. They know when things are being blatantly dishonest, but are spreading at a rate that's incredibly high. They know what they do to place those things that are spreading in terms of the algorithm and the ranking. You can control all that. There's no bias in doing that. That's just the way you think about your business. Where I do think they have a problem or a challenge is they can't determine what you, Rob Richardson, are allowed to determine as truth. That's dangerous, right? Trying to actually monitor you. So I do, again, there's more responsibility. How we turn AI into good, let's be very clear. AI is
because I want to talk about that, how we turn AI into good. And as I let you transition into your answer, because keep going there, I do believe the Facebook mostly, but there's some other data and tech companies too that have made people question, that have made people suspicious of AI, that has people nervous about AI. And I think that is dangerous, because I do believe we need to keep moving and keep innovating. But if there's not trust built in, and if there's a natural reaction from the public to think everything is about controlling their thoughts or it's just about eliminating their jobs, it becomes harder for us to innovate and move forward as a society. So I do think building up trust in AI is really important. So, and how AI can be good. So you were going there.
And that's an easier one, to be honest, because I'll come back to the AI for good, but just on that, and that's a really important point. Trust relates, in my opinion, entirely to privacy. And where people start to get really turned off, where they start to get really nervous, is when they start to recognize that my information is being used kind of without my knowledge, but then it's showing up on an ad. It's showing up here. I swear I was having a conversation with my wife, and the next day I started seeing Facebook ads for it. The other day I went into a store and I just, I was shopping and, wanted, like, I was hungry, right? There's a little, like, this jerky thing. I've never seen it before. I just grabbed it because it was there and it looked good or whatever. And that night I started getting ads on Facebook for that jerky, and it freaked me out. I'm in the industry, right? And I know these things. So I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. How the hell? And then what I realized is I use Google Pay at the grocery store. And so I'm talking like within an hour, I'm getting served up ads on something that I just did physically in person. That's creepy. So here's what I think is going to happen on the creep factor is we're going to experience a revolution around privacy. And it's going to focus primarily on the idea that privacy is a commodity. We are exchanging it for goods and services. Now, look, I think most of us today are not naive to the fact that Google's and Facebook's and these things are free because they're using our data. Yeah. We think of them as ad machines. So that part is pretty well understood. What we don't understand is what exactly am I sharing and what are you doing with it?
We don't have informed consent.
We don't have informed consent. And the next piece of informed consent is, okay, I hear you, but you know what? I don't want my face scanned. How much is my face worth to you? $25 a year? Done. Here you go, Facebook. I will pay $25 a year to continue to use your service. But instead of trading you this piece of my privacy, I'm just going to give you money. Because again, these things are all a commodity.
Right.
Now, today, nobody really understands the value. So nobody wants to go down this path because they're still sitting here. I'm just hoarding and hoarding data because I think one day I'm going to have I'm going to win. This is the new arms race, right? But we as consumers need to demand transparency. Then we need to demand optionality, which says, look, you can do whatever you want. It's your service. I'm the one using it. But you need to show me a full disclosure of where all my information is going, and I should have the ability to opt out. Now, if I opt out, let's say I turn off facial recognition on Facebook. Facebook goes, okay, that's cool. Guess what? You can't upload photos anymore. Okay, we're making an exchange, right? So this is a crucial
And I think most
piece.
people, if they will still probably disclose as long as they're informed about what's being disclosed.
This is what
I think most people probably will.
Make the decision. Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm good. I don't want to pay $100 or I want to use the photo thing. It's worth it. Again, it's a commodity. We're trading. You know what I'm saying? Today, it's very one-sided because we're trading, but we have no idea. There's no table that tells us the value. I have no idea whether I just handed you, maybe I'm paying $1 million a year for Facebook. I don't know. You know, so that is definitely key. And I think when you do that, you start to build that trust. Now, you talked about the next piece of this, which is like jobs and just these other more insidious things. Law enforcement. I mean, there's a lot of conversations.
Yeah, law enforcement, definitely.
Facial recognition. I mean,
it's already being used in protests right now to identify people.
So that is definitely a concern. But I do think people also need to understand how many great things have happened as a result of this technology as well.
And I also tell Black people this. I mean, the fact is, we have to participate in some level, I think, of the facial recognition because machines learn through experience. So if they don't see us, they don't understand it. So it's not like we're not going to use technology.
No, exactly. No. And that's a really good point. And this goes back to, again, the way these models get trained and, the whole image recognition.
You still need Black people in to go over to your greater point. Yeah. But we need to participate in the process too and know that it doesn't help. You can't opt out.
You can't opt out. No. And we need to do a better job. I laugh, and this is probably maybe going to sound controversial, but the way image recognition works, it is actually harder with a darker complexion because there's less reflection, right? So, a computer doesn't look at you and understand all the nuance of what makes you you. A computer is actually measuring how the light's bouncing, the shadows. If I see two shadows, I know kind of how large your nose is. I can tell you have hair, you don't have hair.
I actually had Brian Burkeen. You know Brian Burkeen?
Of course, yeah.
I had him on the show. He went through that in detail. How it's got the pale male it's good at, but it's not good at anything else.
No, this is very true. And so it's frustrating. Now, again, the companies are not necessarily responsible for the technology still being developed, but why you put something out as a consumer product that doesn't work for Black people is just
correct.
It's just, again, who was in the room?
Especially in law enforcement, I'm just saying.
Come on. And so, this is where, again, not having inclusive voices in the room making these decisions is how these mistakes occur. First and foremost,
absolutely.
Again, you could avoid so much of this by just having a more informed process. And so this is what people, and again, in terms of AI, look, we talk about all the terrible things that can happen and arrest in this. There's also just simple things like language. Let's just say, for instance, you're a retail shop and, I want to go shop for some sneakers and, you've got tennis shoes and you've got this and you've got that. Well, look, if I live in the Northeast, I buy sneakers, man, that's what I wear. I don't know what a tennis shoe is, right? So right there, if you don't adapt to that language that's regional, you miss a sale.
Absolutely.
So again, having broader, inclusive kind of involvement in these things it's just better for everybody, let alone just the right thing to do. But again, I've given up on talking about the right thing to do. I'm just going to talk about pure economics because that is a language that everybody should understand.
Is that pure economics? Because doing the right thing can lead to more money. Let's just get it.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, if you don't want to think this is, you don't think diversity and inclusion is important because it doesn't mean anything to you, well, guess what? It is statistically proven that you have a higher performing team. So let that be your motivation.
Exactly. And I love the part about technology connecting and making sure that your company is having empathy and understanding for the end user and those who actually use the product. Let me get to some final rapid questions as we wrap up here. So what's an important truth you have that few people might agree with you on?
Oh, wow. An important truth that few people might agree with me on. I go back to just curiosity being probably the most important trait that I think as an individual that you can have. I think just that open-mindedness, that willingness to just learn and ask questions and assume that, everything is a teacher. I could meet the most racist, biased, awful person in the world, but if I'm going to sit in a train car with them for, 6 hours, I might as well turn that into an experience to try to understand
Absolutely.
what makes them who they are, and so that is really important. And I think, the more controversial side might be to apply it in that train car scenario. I had somebody say to me one time in this seminar, and it was, again, a very controversial thing, but, and he was a Jewish guy, which just makes this even more kind of interesting. But he's like, I'd like to forgive and have an objective conversation with Hitler, an open-minded, curious, because I want to really understand. Like, that is such a foreign concept to me, to be that just evil, that I almost, like, part of me is like fascinated. Like, I want to sit and I want to engage. And so being able to, like, look at somebody like that, to look at just something that is just pure, just hatred and vile, and say, you know what? I'm gonna see what this person's really about. I'm going to engage them. Like,
I actually agree on that. Here's the reason, though, because I think, to add to that point, a lot people are saying, well, okay, Hitler did that because he was evil. Clearly he was evil, and but a whole nation followed him.
There you go.
There's something there.
There's
so
something there.
Was it something unique to all the people in Germany, or is it in all the human condition? And we need to understand how that happened to make sure
and
that
what
we're self-aware.
He did in particular to go unlock that, right?
Correct.
Again, it's easy to be like, no, I hate that guy. I would never even step for. No, of course, that's like our natural human reaction because we're mostly decent people. But again, if you can hack your brain to go, I'm going to turn Hitler into a teacher, and I'm going to try to understand. It's a really gross thing to think about, but again, to me, that's a mastery of that curiosity, right? That I will let every preconceived notion and emotion and opinion dissipate, and I will be purely an open-minded sort of fact absorption. Like, again, it takes a mastery. I can't say that I could do that. I think we all have these moments, but there's an opportunity for all of us to just completely let our guard down and completely absorb the world around us. And I think it'll make us just richer human beings, ultimately.
I completely agree. You have a committee of 3, living or dead, that can be your advisors in business and or life. Who would those 3 people be, and why?
Oh, man. So let's back it up. So I think, going a little more historical, I find Malcolm X to be one of the most fascinating characters. And it's actually not for the reasons why I think a lot of people are attracted to just his words and his energy. His transformation multiple times throughout his life is, again, back to that curiosity. Do you think Red, back in the early parts of his life, thought he was going to become who he became, right? And then even then, when he was in the nation and kind of was leading that effort, and then as he evolved through the trip to Africa, like, that level of self-awareness and evolution, to me, is amazing. And I think that the world and the universe in particular, when somebody has that much charisma and ability and learning and mind expansion, they tend to live a shorter life. I feel like they accelerate through life so quickly. And I think that's what I find so fascinating. I think Tupac is a very similar character in the sense that he was a very transformed, his entire life was reinvented. I love
your committee here. Malcolm and Tupac.
Malcolm and Tupac, and again, I just, it's just back to that theme of just sort of that transformation. I could say that I find Malcolm X's words inspiring. I love Tupac's music, but to me, it's actually not about the artist or the speaker or the leader. It's really about that journey that I find to be just fascinating. And then, I think in kind of a more sort of modern setting, it's funny. Because I read a lot, I tend to gravitate towards just different leaders based on what I'm dealing with. I think Tony Hsieh from Zappos is a fascinating leader, the way he thinks about culture, the way he defined his company, a shoe company, as a customer service company. And that was the mission. That was the goal. Let's provide the best customer service. So if we're selling shoes or we launch an airline, it doesn't matter. Zappos will be all about customer service. That's so powerful. I look at, like, the story of Phil Knight. Oh my God, I just read that book, so it's a little top of mind, but, like, oh my goodness. I mean, you talk about just being on the rope and just having the most awkward. I mean, he had a guy in a wheelchair. He had a guy that was 300 pounds. I mean, this is who built Nike. You know what I'm saying? So I know I gave more than 3, but I just, those first 2 to me are just such iconic and just amazing individuals for their transformation. And then just look for people in industry that, can give me some advice would be my committee there, and the industry person would rotate depending on kind of what I was dealing with at the time.
That's a really, really good committee. Final question here. You have a billboard, a Google ad that it's a saying or it's or displays your belief, what would that say and why?
Fortune favors the bold. You know, you got to take risks in life. You got to have courage. You know, I don't think anybody has achieved anything, you know, notable ever by just kind of being timid and just sort of being reactive. You know, you got to put yourself out there. You got to make big bets and make big decisions if you want big outcomes. Look, not everybody is in the same mode of where they want to get to, but if you want a big outcome, you got to take big steps. It doesn't just happen by just playing it safe. So be bold.
Absolutely. We had Robert Greene on the show, best-selling author, The 48 Laws of Power. I think one of the laws is he talks about being bold. He said, everybody admires the bold. Nobody admires the weak.
There you go. There you go. There you go. That's perfect. Perfect way. I should go check that out, actually.
Yeah, Will Hayes, Lucidworks. I appreciated having you on the show. Appreciate it. It was great content.